and Boston, and he's a two-time vice president of the Dungarvan and West Waterford Chamber. I'm delighted to welcome Vincent Petit to the You and Your Business studio. Hiya, Vincent.
Hi, Alec. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. I'm sorry I'm going to have to take you back to school days. I do this with all my guests. For some, it's torture. For others, it's pleasant recollections. Tell me about last year in school and what you were thinking back then.
I think in last year, typically teenage stuff. I got to be honest with you, and not too much academic thought going through my mind at that point. Being a teenage male in the mid to late 80s, so not a lot dodging responsibility. Really finding the shortest path to wherever I could get to Alec. So yes, I was one of those. I'm afraid not really stellar in the academic front.
It was quite interesting. You came from a large family. Tell me how that sort of worked for you.
That worked wonderfully growing up. Lots of fun, lots and lots of fun, and always and still a very close family. Always in contact, and it has been, it really does in many ways. It defines you. There were 11 of us in all.
Wow.
And as I said, I was number 9 in there. But I was number 9 of under the age of 10, so wow. it was like that, and then subsequently I had 2 younger sisters. So that was very defining, and as you can imagine, it was very hard on my mum and dad. My dad was running a successful country hotel in Clonmel, and working very hard, and my mum equally so, not only rearing the 11 of us, but she also did the laundry for the hotel. It was in our basement. Literally, it was in our basement. Obviously, it was a reasonably big house, which would need to be for all 13 of us, but it had a basement, and that was converted into a laundry. And my mum used to do daily the sheets and the towels and everything would come up, and she would work there for hours on end and get them ready for turnovers. So that was kind of what defined it for us. With a very busy house, and lots going on all the time.
Well, I mean, it's a job in itself, just running a hotel, because I know those involved seem to have a sort of more hours in the day than anybody else has, just to make it work.
It is, and you know, it is. There are many lessons there that we've learned in our businesses, and we try hard. Sometimes we gravitate towards this hotel mentality, which is, it's your everything. You're a bedroom, you're a restaurant, you're a bar, you're catering, your functions. You're trying to do everything, and you suddenly have this monster that you have to feed. You've got a wage bill, and you've got to have people there all the time, and it becomes this monster that needs to be fed. And we constantly have to check ourselves, Mike and I, in our businesses, to make sure that we don't end up back there. That we're not, you don't go suddenly you create this monster, and you're constantly feeding it with revenues. And it really is. It is like that. And even when we opened up our 360 Cookhouse in 2017, it was we'll do it all day long, and we'll hit all the various different market sectors, and we can justify it because we have the staff there and we'll use them. And it was a real. Again, and we realized a little bit later that we're just right back to our hotel days. You're just, that doesn't work. You need to segment your market, you need to segment your activities, and you need to say, you need to condense it as much as possible, which was the other lesson we learned in Clonmel Hotel with the nightclub business, which was, nobody wants to have, you don't want to have a moderately successful nightclub that runs, 3 or 4 nights a week. What you want is one night, a Saturday night, and you want to pack those people in, and you want to say, thank you very much. We'll see you next week. There were many lessons to be learned from that industry.
But you weren't lured straight into the hospitality area. You had a bit of a circuitous journey to get to it.
I did, I did, because I kind of resisted it, and I think my mom as well was again being number 9 and having siblings who had gone down into the hospitality, into the hotel business, had trained in hotel management. She probably felt that maybe it wasn't for me. And that, like I said, maybe I should get a nice little job in the bank might suit me better, and it probably would have, Alec, in truth, at the time, because I wasn't hugely motivated. But at the same time, that sort of the industry, it keeps luring you back. you know, when you're at odds and you're struggling to find stuff to do or get a job or to find a plan, you know, there's always work. There's always work there in the hotel. You're always work there in some capacity, and you keep getting sucked back into it. And eventually you realize, oh, okay, well, you know, maybe there is life in this. Maybe I can do it, but learn my lessons and try not to repeat all the mistakes that you know that we made over the years.
I know we can all do that. You did manage to get back somewhat into education in terms of sort of a business diploma, and then got involved in business law. So it showed you had some academic tendencies, if only it was just a break away from the hospitality sector.
It was, and I remember, you know, my brothers, when I told them that, you know, again at the behest of, you know, my mum sort of throwing options at me, and I'll say, okay, I'll do that. And when they said, you're going to do law, I said, you want to be a solicitor? And I said, no, I don't want to be a solicitor. Are you kidding me? Who'd be nuts? No, I just want to know how everything works. You know, I want to understand that, you know, that when I'm in the room in business, when you're in the room, you know, you need to have an understanding that, you know, you're not totally reliant on the other people in the room, you know, to guide you, that you have some indication. And that was my rationale. But again, it might have been a little more hyperbole than anything else, because I didn't really, as I say, I didn't really accomplish much in that level. But I did get a good grounding in, you know, in basic legal tenets, and they become very, very useful in days like this, particularly, you know, in contracts, and understanding the process. And again, as we get on in business, you know, we deal with solicitors more and more and more, and it is helpful to have some understanding of what the basic tenets are.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I suppose having spent another few years within the hospitality and the family business, you got lured out of it again just to try your hand at something else.
Yeah, we did. Well, lured out of it was one thing. It was again, the family business got sold. And my mum and dad decided that they were going to sell their hotel and retire, which they did in 1997. And it's funny, the hotel is in Clonmel, and my dad bought it in 1971. He was the general manager of the Tower Hotel Group at the time, and they had bought the hotel in 1970, I think, but they had union problems and they never got to open it. So I think he kind of persuaded them to sell it to him at a very good deal. And so after 27 years, he decided, okay, I you know, we've had enough of it, and they sold it in June 1997. They had bought a house in Glengarve, County Cork, by the August, and they have not been back to Clonmel since. It's funny. They had just, you know, and that's another, again, a lesson in the hotel business, you know, in any industry, you know, when it ends, it ends, you know, and sometimes, you know, you don't drag it out. You don't drag it out too much. So they sold it, and we were sent off on our merry way to make our fortune. And yeah, I aligned myself with one of my other brothers, and we got into telecoms, with basically selling mobile phones, which is a nice way of putting it. Which we did with a retail unit in Kilkenny City, and sort of, yeah, we looked at some of the things that were happening in telecoms at the time, and looked at a few projects, and they didn't really go very, very far, and that was in 97. So by 2000 or so, yeah, I had decided I'd check out fresher pastures, greener pastures, wherever they may be, and I ended up over just outside Boston.
Wow.
For about a year.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, over there
that must have been a cultural shock.
You know, something, it's not, I suppose, being Irish and going to Massachusetts and near Boston, you know, it's not, and going to work in an Irish bar restaurant, not too much. Right. It wasn't too much, actually, and staying with Irish people, so it wasn't too bad. But again, you pick up the things, and you realize over there at that time, people, you know, the work ethic was second to none. Nobody had one job. Nobody I knew, nobody I worked with had one job. They all had at least two jobs. Some even had three. It was just the way it was all. It's not something that I entirely agree with now. You know, you wouldn't want that for you or your kids. You wouldn't work them. But that's what they did over there. It was all about work. And so you pick up on that, and you realize, I began to realize that, yeah, I needed to really start applying myself, and get a little more serious about what to do with oneself for one's life.
Yeah, and but what you saw was scalability in terms of restaurants as compared to what we had back here.
Very, very much so. Very much so. I landed in a place called O'Connor's Bar and Restaurant by a Limerick man and his wife, and they were incredible people, and they put me up for ages. And they had this really successful business that they had grown literally on the side of the highway, an Irish bar, single story that they just kept expanding, and yes, suddenly from coming from a hotel where you were doing maximum maybe 100 dinner covers on a busy night in the restaurant, these guys were doing 800 and 900 on a Saturday night. I remember
Wow.
they used to and Paddy's Day was amazing. Paddy's Day in March, Massachusetts, odds are it's going to be snowing, and the year I was there it was snowing, it was bitterly cold, and yet there were queues outside that door. People would queue for an hour in the snow to get in, and they'd be out in 45 minutes. They'd go in for their bacon and cabbage, and that's it. It was just this ritual. They said, no, it's Paddy's Day. We go to our Irish restaurant. But it really,
Now,
you learned a lot.
what do you think was the secret of them being able to scale that? Because and then to maintain that customer base.
Um, that was a really, really good question. And I remember speaking to Brendan in relation to it about, and it was about being authentic in the sense that and not overselling yourself, being what you are, and happy to do it. They did, by their own admission, they did play a little bit on the Irish sort of thing. They did play on that. But when people can associate, then particularly over there, and particularly ethnically, if people can associate, well, then that's something that it's a card you have to play. And he said that you can't ignore it. If I have to make a fool of myself, and if I go around in my green waistcoat, and he did with a tie on, and played, and if I act the jobbing every now and then because that's what people expect, he said that's what I'll do. That's what I'll do. That keeps them coming back. It keeps them coming back, and they know what to expect. And he said also consistency. He said that's key here. He said there's no point being brilliant one day and useless. He said be middle of the road, but be middle of the road all the time. And then people know what to expect. And it's all about managing people's expectations. And if you manage their expectations, you always have the opportunity to exceed them. But if you set them too high, he said, you're on a loser from day one.
Yeah, it's amazing because when you talk about 700-800 covers on a Saturday night, wow, you must
Yeah.
have some team working there and working in unison.
Okay, absolutely, very much so in that system. And I didn't think honestly, I didn't think you could do that in Ireland. I thought, listen, okay, that's American, you could do that. That's the sort of numbers that could be achieved, and that would be very, very successful. But no, fast forward to 17, 18 years later, and when we did get our second pop at a restaurant, very much with scalability inside, we can do 700-800 people in the height of the summer here, during on a Saturday or a Sunday. We have done those sort of numbers. It's
Wow.
and it's systems. Yeah, it's systems, Alex. Make sure they're right systems, and managing your people.
Yeah, it's interesting. You came home, you teamed up with your brother and Michael. So obviously together you had something, you gelled together. But just talk about that experience at home. What did you set up? How did you get involved? And what were the lessons learned from that?
Well, when I got home, he had Michael again. As always, he's a very, very proactive guy, and he had opened up some premises in Holland for a guy, a couple of pubs.
Yeah.
He had done that. He went over and he'd set it up, and he'd motor on, and he'd open up another one. And he was anxious to get to come back to Ireland, obviously, and to set up business. And he had looked at he'd been in London, and he looked at the Pret a Manger model, and really actually he wanted to do that, to do a deli sort of side, a takeout deli place in Dublin. And I think then he got a call from his father-in-law to say, "Oh, Mike, I'm here in Dungarvan, and there's a restaurant here that is going to come up for lease, and it's a cracking little place. It's actually being run by, as it turned out, it was being run by the uncle of the Collison brothers at the time." Yeah, and they said, listen, they're moving on. They made some good money there. Would you have a look at it? So he went down. He had a look at it. He said, okay. It was a small restaurant. It was like a 60-seater, but and it was a really small kitchen, I remember. But yeah, Mike went down there. Mike and Jill, his wife, and they had a newborn baby, and they went in there and they started trading in the Mill restaurant. they did that for about 6-9 months, and I came back from the States, and he said, listen, when you're coming back, would you mind, we want to take a holiday, would you keep an eye on the place for a couple of weeks? I said sure, and as I said, I've never left. But the lessons from that were about size and scalability, as you mentioned, Alec. We could see that the work you put into something of that nature, it's huge, it's massive, and it really is about having the scope to scale up, so that it's still the same amount of work, it's the same amount of a resources you put in there. It really is. The bigger you get, the greater the rewards.
I mean, if we just talk about business today, and so we moved on, and you've got successful businesses there. If we just talk about the food business in particular, training, what sort of program have you got for training? Have you all the processes that you need there? So once you onboard people, you take them in hand from day one.
Absolutely, and that's ever more important, and that's been really hammered home in these COVID times, particularly where now it's absolutely essential, and people have every expectation that people are up to spec as they should be. Obviously, HACCP came in, the health and awesome, the critical control points in the catering industry, that came in over the years as well, and that was actually a big thing, because that pushed everybody towards allowing systems in, allowing external systems in, and sort of an internal audit scenario whereby people are going to come in and check you out, and it's very regimented, but it's very clear the path you must follow. So that opened up the doors for I think further training scenarios. It's our industry is renowned for its high turnover of staff. So, and you might think, well, you train somebody, and they could be gone in no time, and you question the value of it, but because for the very reason that you have such a high turnover of staff, constant training is hugely important, and we still aren't the best in the world at it, but we're trying desperately to improve. This week alone, we have about 24 people commencing work with us as we reopen for outdoor dining. That's just this week. There'll be more later, next month, and absolutely training forms the absolute core of that, and it also gets a commitment out of people. And they've got to come in, and they're going to have to do 3 hard days of training across the board. And if people last that, and if they stick it, and if they turn up every day, they've got skin in the game then. And then I can work with these people, and not all of them do. So it's a critical tool that we have.
Would you say the adage of hire for attitude and the rest can be trained into people would be a good one to use in that industry?
100%. Absolutely. We absolutely. We don't hire experienced people almost genuinely for a lot of our roles. Some of them, obviously, we need them. They need to be experienced and in chefing or otherwise. But when we're hiring for our floor, no, we rather raw, young, enthusiastic people, because we bring them in, we train them, and we mold them. And there's one thing you say, you can't train the people, the smile, that initial reaction, that smile, that greeting. I mean, it is just so important, and we have to remind ourselves of that sometimes, Alec, as well, that it is just, you can't get robotic about this, and it really is what sets really what people want. People who come in to dine these days, it's experiential. They want to experience. They're not there for just for the food to critique it. Sure, some are, but it has to be an all-round experience. And the people who are serving them, the people who are looking after them, they are a critical part of that. And I'll tell you, we have the best people we have are not the most technically gifted waiters, bar people, or anything, but it's their attitude and it's their smile. And if they can smile and look you in the eye and say, "How are you doing?" well, then they're for us.
Exactly. There's a good lesson for everybody there in that, in terms of employing people. There's a number of challenges, and I'm going to take these in sequence because, I mean, obviously you've surmounted these. Let's just talk about COVID. I mean, that sort of kicked in March of last year. What was your sort of initial reaction, and how have you responded in relation to it?
Yeah, the first reaction, like everybody at the time, was, "Oh, listen, a couple of weeks, okay, this is a pain in the butt, but listen, let's make the most of it, and let's factor it in." But I suppose, and that's, you can look at it generally, but definitely, suddenly, when you cut off revenues like that, that's scary. That is very, very scary, and I can understand how an awful lot of people, businesses and particularly, really, really struggle with that, because again, the margin in hospitality is very, very low. People think that there's huge money. There isn't. the most successful restaurants are working off single-digit margins,
Really?
net profit margins. Absolutely, they really are. So there isn't a lot of money in it at that level. And you do, once if the flow stops all of a sudden, like it did, it's panic. You do panic on that front and think, okay, what do? You get proactive and you stop. You make sure that you hold on to what you have, and you stop everything that's going out. You stop your DDs. At least we did. You stop your DDs. You talk to people and you say, "Hold on, guys. Let's just hold for a second and let's just see how this one plays out." Fortunately, if you get out in front of it and if you talk to people, Alec, and which you did, everybody was very, very accommodating, very amenable across the board. And that's been the case. I mean, throughout for the last 15 months, I must say, dealing with everybody commercially, everybody has been fully understanding and is there as long as as long as you're transparent and you're open with them and honest with them and follow through with what you did, what you say you're going to do.
I think there's a valuable lesson for people in business, because for a lot of people, when they see themselves in trouble, they go off hiding away somewhere instead of being proactively out meeting those
absolutely,
creditors and that and dealing with it.
Absolutely, and it's a perfectly natural human response. It is that freeze, that paralysis, and it's sort of built in. I mean, in Irish business over years, there has always been this stigma attached with as we were discussing what we might describe as business failure, and I say thankfully that is changing these days, where it's not the same. People accept that it happens, and all people ever want is to know where they stand on any given day. And the only problem, the only time you ever have any problem with somebody really is when you say, when you don't engage with them. And we had our hiccups in 2009, like many people. We expanded our business, and that did not go well. And I found myself having to sit down one morning and make multiple phone calls, and everyone bar, of maybe 25, 30 phone calls, all bar one, not a problem. Really appreciate the call. Let's talk about it and see how we go. Sure. All bar one. In fact, one phone call, it went really, really well. And he said, no problem. We'll talk again. And, solicitor's letter came in 3 days later. So, in fairness, but people have to make their own decision. But you do it. It was a scary time, lads, March, as it progressed forward. It was a scary time. We were fortunate. We would come off a busy couple of years, and we were okay that we weren't desperately concerned. We weren't under any major pressure, and we knew we could hold firm for a little while. But yeah, there have been some very hairy moments, no question.
Yeah. So it gave you probably opportunities maybe just to review the business in terms of your offerings. Did you make any such substantial changes, or were you able to confirm what you were doing was actually the right way to set your menus and all of that?
Set your menu. Probably more of the latter. We were we remained confident, and throughout the couple of reopenings that we did, we were opened obviously last July for a 3-month period, and then we got shut down again, and then we reopened for the 3-week period in December. And no, on each occasion we kept to our model. We kept to it very, very clearly. And it worked each time. We were very happy with it. It was wonderful, actually. The great thing, people were very appreciative of getting back in. We'll see about this time, but certainly last year, people were very appreciative to get back in, and people were still very conscious of the risk that was there. And I must say, it was a pleasure last summer, to deal with people. They were far more forgiving. They were less judgmental. They were less critical, and it was actually a wonderful summer we had of work. And the customer base were really good. So we felt largely vindicated by what we have done, and we will continue with that system. Always looking to adapt, Alec. We do honestly believe that. Always, everything in businesses themselves and what you do in business, they all have a life cycle, and sometimes it can be hard to face up to what that life cycle might be, and in timing, and you need to identify when it's when you might think it's beginning to wane. But we're never afraid to change. Sometimes we change too much, but we're never afraid to change and adapt. Because, as you well know, if you're not in control of the change, well, then, it gets in control of you, and then you're rightly snookered.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been other changes taking place, particularly in the hospitality sector, with what we'd call influencers coming in and being critiques, and maybe not even with any qualifications, except they've a following. Yeah. That must be a challenge for not just yourselves, but everybody in the hospitality sector.
It is, absolutely. It's a huge challenge, and you're right. you are so powerless against these because, you know, and oftentimes we've had some of them and we know factually that they've never been near our place, you know, and yet they might have. Now, fortunately, we've never had a hatchet job done us, nothing like that.
Sure.
But we know certain influencers have mentioned us and I've said this, and we know they haven't dined with us. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough on that level. Like when we get genuine criticism, Alec, you know, we really welcome it. We really welcome it. We don't care, no matter how bad it is. And in fact, the worse it is, the more we want to hear it because we can't address it and affect it at all. And it was something my dad had told us many years ago. He said, Vincent, you know, if you can deal with a customer complaint well, you will have a customer for life.
Yes,
it'll actually be better if you deal with it well. And I've really taken that to heart here. We all have here. And we welcome everybody who has something to say, who goes to the effort to say, guys, we were with you and this wasn't good and this happened and that happened. You know, there is no, you know, there's no excusing, there's no explaining, there's no arguing.
No,
that was their experience. They're being honest and you have to thank them for it and you've got to address it. As simple as that. As I say, even with the influencers, it's the same. But you need to know, you know, there's no point taking them on. You know, you can't win. You can't win in that scenario. You don't. You just try and take the high ground and say, yeah, we'll improve where necessary.
I must say I'm often surprised in places where there's a complaint, and I do my best not to spoil a night by having a problem with the restaurant. But generally, if I have something of a complaint, I don't want a bottle of wine and I don't want something off my meal. I just want it sorted when I come back the next time.
No, absolutely, and more importantly, people just want to know that they're heard, Alec. You know, and that's it. They must know that they're heard, and that's why, you know, it's a very simple policy here. We have if there is any issues or any complaint, and made to a member of staff, it is always, and a second member of staff must always then go and address that and react to it, and that just shows the customer that, listen, that the problem has been shared. You know, because we've had it in the past where somebody said, listen, I complained to my waiter about this and nothing happened. And you go to the waiter and they said, well, yeah, but I kind of sorted it. But I said, well, who did you tell? And they didn't tell anybody. And they said, no, the first thing people just need to know that they've been heard first and foremost. And then, as you say, of course, rectify it in whatever way possible, but make people know that they've been heard. I've received complaints personally myself, you know, and what I do is I go and I tell, you know, I'll tell a waiter, or I'll tell one of our runners who are, you know, and not say, listen, they've just complained to me. Would you go over to them, please, just and make them aware that you're aware of it and that you're going to help address it, you know, just so that people know and that comfort that this has been shared, it's been acknowledged, and only then can we address it.
And that fits into something that you and I agree. I heard you mention it earlier. Manage people's expectations.
Oh, yeah, it is so true. And Mike constantly, it says that to me about doing that. It's a key thing. It is a key thing, particularly in our industry. And you know, there are so many, there are awards out there, and there's so many plaudits you can get. And you know, sometimes they're not what you want. They just bring added pressure, and they bring judgment upon you. And people think, well, these people, you know, they got a wonderful review, and now I you know, this is their expectation. So we are, again, you know, we'll welcome a wonderful review. Don't get me wrong. We love to get them. And TripAdvisor, you know, it's a necessary evil, you know, but you've got to engage it and you've got to manage it. But you must try constantly with people. We try and keep it casual. And you know, the first thing, Alec, really that does manage people's expectations is that initial reaction from yourself when people walk into a premises. That is the most significant thing. It's not the food, it's not the lighting, it's not where they are. It is that welcome that they get from whomever and whenever. That is the key to actually managing people's expectations, because immediately the guard goes down. We find that if people can feel as if they're welcome, first and foremost, that they're welcome and there are no airs and graces, and we're all very casual here. So we try hard not to fall into the trap of over-formalizing ourselves and pitching ourselves too high.
Finally, where can people find out more about your business and your various offerings?
Well, we would love them to go to 360cookout.ie. We are opening, you would say, what did we do through COVID and how did we change? We just really realized how wonderful Dungarvan and West Waterford is. We really have. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Alec. We have the Greenway down here has been a revelation over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's brought loads of people. But Dungarvan, we're not successful. Our businesses, we're not successful. Dungarvan is a success, and we ride the coattails of that. And if they go to 360 Cookhouse or 360 Key Stay, they will see our range of events. They can go to Jitterbeans too if they're on the Greenway and they want to get their food for their rides. But we are opening 360 Key Stay. It's an 18-bedroom accommodation that we're opening later this month. It's not a hotel. We call it Key Stay because it defies sort of the regular terms in terms of hotel or B&B or townhouse. It's not those, but we urge everybody to go online, check it out, and then come visit us in Dungarvan. We'd love to see them all, including you, Alec.